Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episodes 1, 2, and 3. In an era of Star Wars fraught with division, Andor has been a rare class act of storytelling, intention, and heartbreaking sacrifice, and I am loving every second of it. Even if Disney Plus didn't have the confidence to release these episodes weekly, this is the first of 4 batches of these breakdowns, and we're breaking them down 3 episodes at a time. And these first 3, from Yavin 4 standoffs to Chandrila raves, let's strap into a TIE Avenger we don't know how to fly and break down some really interesting details that you might have missed. And the best way to support New Rockstars is to grab something from our merch store, nerdriot.shop, like this Skeleton Crew Neil "I just want to go home" shirt, or one of our awesome Marvel designs. Alright, the episodes of Andor this season open with the typical Lucasfilm bumper lineup of droid heads and helmets. This lineup is Darth Vader, then BB-8, then C-3PO, Kylo Ren, R2-D2, a Rebel pilot helmet, an Imperial Stormtrooper, a First Order Stormtrooper helmet, and we end on our beloved B2EMO, whose eyepiece gets the brightest flash, because he probably still has some of Marva's the Empire rage still in him after projecting that posthumous message that led to the riots on Ferrix that ended Season 1. Little recap here, Cassian Andor was a smuggler on Ferrix who ended up with Luthen Rael, who daylights as an antiques dealer on Coruscant with his rebel assistant Clea, while moonlighting as an elusive rebel mastermind codenamed Axis by the Empire. Cassian joins a mission on Aldhani with Vel and Senta, meeting the manifesto-toting Nemec and Arvel, and escaping a beautiful meteor shower and getting away with some loot that Cassian immediately blows in Niamos, where he gets arrested and then imprisoned on Narkina 5, a psychologically tortuous base that actually is building pieces of the Death Star. There's a thrilling escape led by Kino Climb Loy, who cannot swim, and throughout the season we also meet the ambitious Imperial officer Dedra Miro and her attempts to impress Major Partagaz. We also meet a nerdy Imperial cop, Cyril Karn, who blows it and ends up having to move back in with his mom as he simps big time for Dedra. Senator Mon Mothma deals with Luthen Rael while trying to balance an estranged husband and an annoyingly traditional daughter, whom Mon arranges into a marriage with the shady Skulldun family in a scheme to cover up the funds that she had diverted to a rebel cause. Saw Gerrera shows up and does his thing, revealing how fractured the rebel cause still is in 5BBY, and Luthen definitely wins the season with one hell of a monologue that you all should know by heart by now. But Cassian makes it back to Ferrix where Marva had died, and during her funeral march, Luthen, Vel, and Senta actually plan to take out Cassian to avoid him possibly exposing them as rebels. Dedra attends the funeral while Cyril stalks her and ends up saving her. B2EMO projects Marva's posthumous speech, which sparks the riot. Cassian saves Bix, who was being tortured by Dedra, and sends her off on a ship with fellow Ferrix buds Brasso and Wilman. Cassian ends up joining Luthen formally as a rebel. We are now 1 year later in 4BBY, and we open with the sound of the Ferrix anvil gong. This is the metallic clang that opened the show and really gathered the marchers on Ferrix, and that bold march continues now. We open in the Sinar Test Facility 73. Sinar Fleet Systems has long been known as the company that manufactures TIE fighters in their various other forms. The way Sinar appears first here makes it seem like they might be saying this whole planet is called Sinar, but the Sinar Corporation was really named after the Sinar family. Numbering at 73 could be a reference to George Lucas's American Graffiti coming out in 1973. This hangar houses the TIE Avenger, and it's fitting that this is our opening shot because this thing's gonna be the home and asset most important to Cassian, at least in these first 3 episodes. The TIE Avenger model was originally developed for the TIE Fighter video game. The manufactured prototypes of the TIE Advanced X1 inspired future models like the TIE IN Interceptor and this TIE Avenger. The TIE Avenger was one of the first production starfighters to break away from the Imperial doctrine of quantity over quality with the inclusion of deflector shields, a hyperdrive, and warhead launchers. Yes, most of the TIE fighters that we've seen in Star Wars before have to stay local to some other Star Destroyer that has the hyperdrive in it. This one has its own hyperdrive in it that allows it to jump into hyperspace. Nia, a Sinar technician whom Cassian has apparently flipped, wearing a patch with the Sinar symbol, warms up the TIE Avenger and leaves it open for Cassian. Cassian, in disguise as a test pilot, waits in the mess hall as 2 Imperial range troopers pass. These types of range troopers show up during the train heist in Solo, and one of these guys is probably the one with the rocket launcher later. Nia says,
"The password tonight is Kafrene."
The rings of Kafrene are where we first met Cassian on screen in the Rogue One film. Kafrene is a military mining colony in an asteroid belt. Nia is nervous, saying that she's had fun here at Sinar and everything's about to change, but Cassian tells her that being nervous is good because it keeps her awake. And you can see how 1 year after joining Luthen, Cassian has now taken to heart Luthen's messages of sacrifice and a bit of Nemec's manifesto of staying awake to what's going on in the galaxy. And now Cassian is able to use this to recruit others to the cause. Cassian says that she made this decision long ago.
You're coming home to yourself. You've become more than your fear.
Again, Nemec's words about the Empire being an unnatural perversion of the natural state of things plays out so beautifully here. Cassian, as an orphan, has never really had a home, and so he had to create a home out of the connections of his found family that he met along the road. Cassian freaks when he doesn't see a stick or a wheel in the TIE Avenger and just starts hitting buttons blindly, activating the weapons, and then finally the engines warming up is what activates the sphere that accelerates and steers, and a set of rings through which his arm must go through to reach the trigger. I assume to hold one's arm in place as like the guns are moving it. It kind of reminds me of that movie, The Flight of the Navigator, where the kid David has to steer the ship just by moving his hand naturally, and because it's so intuitive, someone used to clunkier hardware like Cassian doesn't really know how to work it. Cassian dramatically readies to take off, but just reverses into the wall, and then messily struggles to steady the TIE Avenger so that it bumps into everything. Just the wire work and the ship movement on this prop with all the sparks showering down, it looks so chaotic. It's like a Rebels episode in live action, and I love it. The heavy repeating turrets on the gun kind of seem like a mounted Z6 rotary blaster cannon, and Cassian randomly fires it thinking it's part of the steering, I think, and then he figures it out and uses it to mow down a row of stormtroopers, and then has to dodge the rocket launcher of the range trooper. As the trooper reloads, the targeting locks on him, and the ship's turbo laser warms up, but then shorts out for a second, and then Cassian squeezes it repeatedly, and then boom, no more range trooper, just a hole in the wall. It's kind of like that gag in Ocean's 11 when Danny and Linus have to replace the batteries in the trigger, and then when they do, they're like, eep. Cassian zips the TIE Avenger through this ice canyon, pursued by two TIE Advanced V1s. This is the same ship that the Grand Inquisitor was rocking in Rebels, and it's the predecessor to Vader's X1. Cassian uses the missiles to collapse the glacier to trap the pursuers, and I love the camera effect of the rapid zoom to spot Cassian escaping the ice, like it's a KTLA helicopter camera finding someone in a police chase and be like, oh, there he is, there he is. And we saw George Lucas use the same type of camera mover when he's tracking the pod racers on Tatooine in The Phantom Menace. On the planet Mina Rao, which is a new grassland outer rim planet created for the show, we get this creepy point of view tracking shot leading into the home of Bix, Brasso, and Willman. We pass Willman sleeping in a hammock, B2 Emo sleeping in his charging station, and then this horror-like sting, similar to Michael Myers' point of view shot that opened John Carpenter's Halloween. And we see in the mirror, Gorst. Yes, Gorst the worst. Gorst was the Imperial doctor who tortured Bix in season 1 using the recorded screams of Dizonite children, which traumatized her and clearly still affects her. Apparently, Tony Gilroy got this idea from a real thing law enforcement did during the Waco standoff. Yeah. As we go through the home, though we see it better later, there is a photo of Marva that they pinned up in this place. I feel like the wind chimes might have also come from their homes on Ferrix. On to Chandrilla, the homeworld of Mon Mothma. The first time we are seeing it in live action after it was first introduced in Chuck Wendig's 2015 Aftermath book. It's a beautiful mountainous world with the shape of a gas giant in the horizon that this planet must orbit. In preparation for Leida's arranged wedding to Stikon Skuldun, we follow Mon Mothma in an impressive oneer that lasts several minutes as she greets various wedding guests, starting with Perrin's Uncle Sordo and Aunt Squidna, who says,
Looking younger every season.
Oh, how effortlessly you lie.
yes, how easy Mon Mothma makes lying look, but not easy for her to actually do. This oneer is just a masterclass in acting from Genevieve O'Reilly as she switches from warm and inviting to everyone she passes, and then when she's alone, panicked and anxious. Her anxiety is really beginning when she looks out over the balcony and sees who we later realize is Luthen Rael. Mon's attaché Erskine Samaj appears. He had a minor role in the animated Rebels season 3 as one of Mon Mothma's servants, and his name is an anagram of James Erskine, who works for Lucasfilm. Mon passes her cousin, Vel Sartha, and on her way to Luthen, she passes Teema, her old flame, who already looks like he might have had a few to drink and will totally make Mon's wedding celebration pretty difficult, as we will see. We see that Luthen has some secret arrangement with the father of the groom, Davos Skolden.
Oh, he's terrible at keeping secrets.
Oh, I've been practicing.
Another example of these spies speaking in code to each other. We will see later that Luthen, as an art dealer, has procured an ancient Rakatan artifact, maybe the coolest Easter egg from these first few episodes, and we'll talk about it later. Back on Mina Rao, we see 436 carved into the terraced farm mound. We later learn how this planet is sectioned off into grids based on the hundreds, so like the 500 block, 600 block, 700 block, 800 block.
Yes, right now they're focused on Council 500.
So it's kind of like street addresses on a 100 numbered block. Bix warns Willman about cozying up with the local woman.
It's a long walk from the silos.
And we will see how this long walk on foot screws them over when the imps show up for inspections in this area in episode 3, and how Willman, being so thirsty, ends up getting Brasso killed. Bix and Willman work as toolies, whom are apparently looked down upon by others on Mina Rao who have shares and visas, which definitely feels like an undocumented immigrant parallel that especially underscores Bix looking at an Imperial transport like an ICE SUV rolling in. And specifically the coded language they used throughout this episode, referring to them as undocumented. I think they wanted that parallel to be pretty evident. Cassian lands the TIE Avenger on a jungle planet that we'll learn at the end of episode 2 is a very important location of the Rebels. Cassian calls out for Porco, which at first I thought could be a reference to Jek Tono Porkins, the Rebel pilot whom we know will fly in the Battle of Scarif and the Battle of Yavin, while Porkins went by the nickname Piggy at some point, as we learned in the 2017 Biggs Darklighter Certain Point of View short story by Pierce Brown. It's not clear if Porkins had been assigned to Yavin 4 by the time of 4BBY. He kind of had a different story than being in touch with Cassian Andor, though it would be fun if it's confirmed on the series that Porkins was the original intended pilot of the TIE Avenger. He originally could have been the hero of the Battle of Yavin for all we know. Gertis is played by Sam Gilroy, Tony Gilroy's son. Gertis and Barty immediately bicker over Gertis telling Cassian the exact number of them, and they argue loud enough for Cassian to hear, so really this crew is just hilariously naive and inexperienced. Cassian later realizes they're part of the Maya Pei Brigade. Maya Pei was a name mentioned by Saw Gerrera with a lot of skepticism in season 1, a group of neo-Republicans.
Maya Pei's a neo-Republican. They're lost!
Now, some of this group thinks Maya Pei is dead, but we learn that their cell had been ambushed, that they lost 6 ships and 40 people, and it kind of sounds like these neo-Republicans are political idealists who think that there's still hope to reinstate the Republic rather than fight the Empire even if it means burning everything down. Institutionalists trying to preserve the status quo in some form, not hardened tactical fighters. It seems like they just lost their first major battle, and Barty's brother assumed command when they didn't hear from Maya and dropped them off at Yavin 4 and then went back to look for other survivors. I think they are an example of how revolutions in our world are composed of some factions of well-meaning idealists who just get completely overwhelmed when shit gets real and they end up turning on each other. Onto the Malthine Divide. Now, there was a city in Legends named Malthi in the grand homeworld of Kenyan, but this mountaintop location reminds us of the Summit Raven's Peak base on Iriadu in the Bad Batch Plan 99 episode. There's just something about these imperialists who love having compounds like Hitler's Eagle's Nest. Ben Mendelsohn returns as Orson Krennic, the director of the Death Star project in Rogue One, and someone who made vocal cameos in Bad Batch as his character. He tells the room of gathered Imperial officers that this meeting is top secret and says known Imperial leaders to us, Yularen and Tarkin, don't even know about this, and he says they'll be informed when the Emperor decides, which kind of feels like Krennic trying to keep this project away from his 2 biggest rivals in the Imperial ranks. Dedra Miro is here, along with her superior, Major Leo Partagaz, and seated at this table is an Imperial science officer with a patch that matches the one Galen Erso had in Rogue One. So this guy might lead that Tarkin Initiative secret think tank, or maybe even oversee Galen Erso's division directly. We see a promotional film about Gorman and their tradition of blowing bagpipe-style Gorman Valley horns to wake up spiders to spin their famous Gorman twill, which is a valuable fiber used in apparel. Gorman is the site of major events to come on this series that you know about if you watched Rebels, and you should. And if you don't want to, we did some recaps of them on this channel. It's a famous event connected to Gorman that Mon Mothma speaks out about a few years from now in the Imperial Senate that actually leads to her showing up with the crew of the Ghost in the animated Rebels series. So this season is setting up that famous Gorman event. Krennic says Emperor Palpatine is focused on an energy initiative.
Stable, unlimited power will transform the galactic economy.
Ha! Saw what you did there! Krennic says Gorman has a mineral called calcite, which they need to coat the reactor lenses. So the Death Star super laser is actually powered by kyber crystals, the minerals from Ilum that powered Jedi lightsabers. So calcite must be a kind of quartz used to focus the plasma beams that emit from the kyber that go through the lenses, I suppose. In addition to the Neo-Republican front of Maya Pei, Saw Gerrera also mentioned the Gorman front to Luthen in season 1. So it sounds like there's already some resistance group on the planet of Gorman pushing back on these calcite demands. An engineering officer warns that gouge mining the calcite from Gorman could stress the planet's core, which could endanger the 9 cities and 800,000 Gormans. But already you can see how Krennic does not care one bit about endangering an entire planet, especially since he's building something that nukes them in one blast. Krennic introduces D. Shambo and Nisus Osar from the Ministry of Enlightenment, a name that feels like a nod to the Ministry of Truth propaganda department in George Orwell's 1984. We've actually seen examples of Imperial propaganda before, like in the Rebels Empire Day episode. D and Nisus describe a pretty disturbing but very sadly true account of how how propaganda works, how to demonize the Gormans as arrogant and selfish, rather than, the peaceful weavers they obviously are, by planting stories about an Imperial naval officer dying due to Gorman shipping lane conflicts, and specifically using the spiders to dehumanize the Gormans as spider-like, similar to Nazi propaganda comparing Jewish people to rats and vermin. Admiral Daysar, chowing down on the spread, asks,
Why not have a plague? Or stage some natural disaster?
We've actually gamed that out. It gets unpredictable very quickly.
I wonder if they're referring to Palpatine's extermination of the Geonosians. While the film Rogue One unfortunately left Krennic to be a stymied man of ambition, bested by a CGI Tarkin and Vader's force chokes, I appreciate how we now get to see Krennic's skill, recognizing Dedra as the smartest plotter in the room and realizing that Dedra has an even more devious plan than propaganda is.
You need Gorman rebels you can depend on to do the wrong thing.
After what happened on Ferrix, Dedra sees the value in exploiting an insurgency to justify absurd overreach. We also see how the Empire auditing all of their resources also creates an issue for Brasso and the rest on Mina Rao, because now the Imperials will be checking visas there. Luthen makes small talk with a guest and a son in the Imperial Navy.
I've been training on Steerguard, but we're all being transferred now.
Really? Where's everyone going?
The Imperial Navy Yard at Steerguard came up in Season 1. Luthen had stolen stuff from there, and Cassian had stole that Starpath unit, which led to Dedra Miro's investigation. So now Luthen is trying to learn where the next Imperial tech vault will be. Vel chats with Clea.
Are we pretending we just met?
No, you've been by the shop.
It's gonna be hard for them to keep track of their double lives, but Vel did meet Clea when Mon Mothma brought her cousin to Luthen's shop on Coruscant in Season 1, and there were other people watching. So if someone were to hear them say, "Nice to meet you," that would raise a red flag. And I just love all the attention to detail in the writing of this show. Like Clea, Tacoma's been putting them back at this Night 1 party and tells Mon that he and his wife Barty are living apart, something that he was surprised that Mon didn't know yet.
So much for the gossiping biddies of Chandrilla.
I like this line because it also tells us that Mon Mothma has not been staying attuned to the small talk and the gossip among Chandrillan highborn families. She's been overly focused on Senate duties and of course all the funding she's been doing for the rebel cause, and this is a sign of distance between her and the rest of Chandrillan society, including her daughter. Runai, Devo's wife and Stekan's mother, tells Mon that Lita and Stekan had their first fight. First, as in Runai expects that all of these Chandrillan arranged marriages are gonna be filled with fights and tension. Lita cries that Stekan won't hold her hand, and Mon apologizes knowing that she was the one who pushed Lita into this marriage. Maya Pei's group begins to fire on each other and Cassian runs for it but gets grabbed. And our final shot of this episode is a red blaster bolt firing over Cassian's head and blinding the frame. I was reminded of what we know will be Cassian's final moment alive on Scarif, engulfed by a blinding light. And Diego Luna has confirmed in interviews that Cassian deliberately kept his eyes open for that. On to episode 2. This opens with the two warring sides of Maya Pei's group, both in the blind, bunkered in the two vessels that Cassian brought to this jungle, sending scouts to crawl in the mud looking for Rika's body. Rika was the female pilot who had gotten shot by Crab, and Gertis suspects
It's a trap.
So it's illegal to talk about a Star Wars show and not point out that every time someone says those 3 words, it's an Admiral Akbar reference. Snee finds Crab's severed foot in a boot, while Nazi finds Rika's goggles, so they must have gotten eaten by that big ol' reptile that we see at the end of this episode. Snee yells at Nazi. Ichuta is a classic Star Wars profane slur that we first heard directed at C-3PO in Cloud City in Empire Strikes Back.
Nice to see a familiar face. Ichuta. How rude.
All of Maya Pei's group have names like Gertis and Snee and Nazi, Plug, Crab, Bezo. And the fact that there are so many of them, I think is meant to suggest that they should be rando red shirts easy to forget, like the mechanics in A Midsummer Night's Dream, that are just kind of here for comedic effect and obviously to give that reptile a lot to eat. But I'm also hoping for redemption, that these dopes will help hold down the Temple of Masasi with Jan Dodonna's group and turn it into one of the most important rebel bases. Dedra and Partagaz return to the ISB on Coruscant, and I just love the overcast muted colors reflected in the mirror glass and the brutalist diagonal angles. This show is just so beautifully shot. Dedra doesn't want the Gorman job and says she'd rather continue chasing Axis, but Partagaz says,
next time, catch them first, then make them famous.
Yeah, I'm getting some vibes as Dedra Miro as Jessica Chastain's character in Zero Dark 30, like she was pressured to give up the hunt for a terroristic boogeyman that she helped mythologize. On Chandrilla, Luthen carts in the big statue that we'll see later, while Mon's husband Perrin tells her that while she was busy playing Mom Who Gives a Teema had too much first night punch and had to be taken home, which sets up the discreet way that Luthen deals with Tay later. Kellen tells Brasso and Bix, it's been 10 years since the last audit, which would mean 14 BBY, just 5 years into the Imperial era, which would have been when the Empire probably first took stock of Mina Rao to set all this up. So since then, no one's really been poking their nose in there. The Yavin 4 group count meal bars. Now the blue labels translate to beans, the blackish green label on the right translates to TOV, the reddish label I had trouble translating. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fog, the Thai Avenger group have to rely on rotten melons. There was a mention of a koyo tree that grew on Yavin 4 that bears fruit, mentioned in the Poe Dameron flight log. We cut from Barty taking a big old bite of the seeds to the ordered array of pods in the Imperial Bureau of Standards. This was Cyril's new job that he got in season 1, and now Cyril Karn gives actually the same speech he was given when he joined this place.
There are no small jobs here at the Bureau of Standards.
Cyril brags to the new initiate, who kind of looks like a copy of Cyril, and Cyril drops names like Varnesian and Kovarn charging rods, and these things are not anything in Star Wars, so it kind of comes off to us like he might just be making these things up, but he has the dead seriousness of Dwight Schrute, and you do not dare question him, especially since he apparently did uncover a pattern of thieving cabals across 4 sectors, which shows how Dedra's thinking is working for Cyril, because remember, Dedra told the ISB that they should be looking for patterns across sectors since the maps are arbitrary lines drawn by the Empire, and it's pointless to stay within those confines when they're conducting investigations. A soldier asks Kellen for Pizos, which is a legal stimulant that Cassian's friend on Niamos asked him to pick up from the store. Lieutenant Kroll drops in on Bix, and the fact that he's alone and sounds like hasn't even met his unit yet should make us a bit nervous. Bix does everything she can to blow him off, releasing some steam in a way that seems to be to keep him out of that machinery den. Bix lies and says that she is a husband, and Brasso shows up at just the right time. On Chandrila, the families take a traditional day 2 wedding hike to a summit where Mon says they'll gaze upon the lands, children will sing, and an elder will wave her hand and they'll all be purified. We learn that Vel and Cinta have cooled a bit and haven't seen each other in a while. The reason Luthen won't tell Vel where Cinta is that Luthen is using Cinta as a backup assassin and maybe didn't want Vel knowing because Vel is too close to these Chandrilan socialites. On Yavin 4, Cassian's group sent Plug out to scout, and they're worried he's gonna flip for food because remember in episode 1, the one thing we heard that guy say was, "Is there any food in there?" But he runs back to report the other group is dragging the TIE Avenger around so that the guns are pointed at them. And we see that Dedra Meero and Cyril Karn have moved in together. Dedra listens to opera music that I assume came from the Galaxy's Opera House on Coruscant. Cyril is trying to get out of dinner with his mother Edie, but Dedra refuses to cancel. We later see because she is eager to tell his mom to f off and show him some respect. At Mon's Night 2 party, guests greet each other with a traditional toast of Sagrona Teema. This toast was first mentioned in 2009's Clone Wars coming up at a banquet attended by the Jedi and Hondo Ohnaka, and the toast has been featured pretty much anytime characters have toasted at fancy events in Star Wars titles ever since. Tay tells Mon,
No one's seen anything like this for a long time.
Well, perhaps there's good reason for that.
Mon is suggesting maybe these super traditional arranged marriages are kind of problematic and modern simpler weddings are less toxic. Tay threatens Mon, implying that he's aware of her money's connection to the rebellion and shakes her down for a payout. And I love how Genevieve O'Reilly plays this, and really how she plays everything in the episode, but particularly here. She has to keep smiling and looking like she's making pleasant small talk, but not too pleasant because she knows her husband Perrin is watching for any signs that these two could be flirting. But Tay doesn't hide anything, and Luthen across the room sees it all go down. Back on Coruscant, Clea returns to her and Luthen's antique shop, which still has the Easter eggs that we saw last season, including the Naboo headdress from Attack of the Clones, the Kel Dor mask belonging to the race of Plo Koon. We see an elaborate Twi'lek Calicori. We see the Star Killer armor in the back room. Also on the far wall, as you walk in, the World Between Worlds tablets from Lothal that Ezra finds in Rebels Season 4, which, like many Easter eggs in the shop, makes no logical sense because Ezra will find these tablets at the end of Rebels Season 4, which is like 3 years after where we are currently in Andor Season 2 of 4BBY. So those tablets still would have been on the ruins. They would not have been removed yet. In fact, they were probably never removed. But also, there's like Indiana Jones Sankara stones from Temple of Doom somewhere in this place. So, we can't just take any of these Easter eggs too seriously. They're just there for fun. Perrin makes a wedding speech, translating Sagrona Teema as a toast to your health, and then adds Sagrona Teema Solom and Solom Sena, which I think means beyond a toast to your health, and also my wishes and my hopes for you. Hope, obviously an important word to Tony Gilroy into Star Wars as the final word that ended Rogue One. Perrin's speech is all about how pain will find you, and his hope is that they learn to reach past that cloud of sadness to find the hidden things of gaiety and amusement, what he calls the music buried beneath all that noise. He says that joy has no wind in its sails and it must be actively pursued and contained in positive memories. And I find it fascinating that such a true sentiment can come from a character like Perrin at such a superficial event. But folks, sometimes the most poetic wedding vows come from couples you know are going to be divorced in 4 years. But truly, joy is not a natural given as we get older. Life keeps giving us more reasons to feel anxiety, and joy has to be actively sought. It's the same kind of sentiment Pixar's Inside Out 2 stated so eloquently. Maybe this is just what happens when you get older. You lose your joy. And I love that we cut to Luthen during the speech. He is unable to take any warmth from this because he isn't really listening. He's eyeing Tay Kolma the entire time and noticing that there's no room for sunlight in Tay's heart either. Never forget what Luthen said in his haunting speech.
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts.
The Yavin 4 groups finally face off, applying what they call Rusky rules, which at first you think is going to be like a Jets versus Sharks weapons-free fistfight, until it's just basically Star Wars rock, paper, scissors. This is great. And like Andy Dufresne escaping Shawshank, Cassian waits for a thunderclap to kick open a drawer where he knows there's a blaster since this was his ship, and he ties up his captor, he sneaks around, and the others hear a growl in the brush, and... 3 of them get swallowed up in one bite. According to the subtitles, this reptile is called a Dudar. Cassian reboards the TIE Avenger and flies away, and kudos to Cassian for not mowing down these guys, even though he totally could, because I think some part of him knows that despite being assholes, they could end up being useful one day to the rebel cause, especially since this episode's epic final shot shows Cassian soaring past the iconic Massassi temples toward the red gas giant of Yavin, confirming that this jungle planet is indeed the very same moon of Yavin 4, where we will spend a lot of time in A New Hope and in upcoming episodes of Rebels. This is very fun, but according to the Rogue One visual guide by 5 BBY a year before this, Jan Dodonna was supposed to be already leading the Massassi group rebel cell out of these same temples. They're already supposed to be here. My guess is that Dodonna's group hasn't yet set up here, or that Maya Pei survivors are just too dumb to hike a couple clicks to a temple where a large, very organized group of rebels are located. Maybe this group becomes Dodonna's group and they just need the right leader of Jan. You always need a Jan. But we also know that by 2 BBY, 2 years in the future from now, Yavin 4 will become the principal base of the rebellion. And Rebels Season 4, Episodes 3 and 4 in the name of the rebellion, Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera get into it via holocall on Yavin 4, and they were voiced by Genevieve O'Reilly and Forrest Whitaker as this episode aired in October 2017, and it was after Rogue One came out. The events of Rebels Season 4 are set in 1 BBY, so I think future episodes of Andor might approach that moment, and I think it'd be pretty fun to see Saw's end of that same call, similar to how Clone Wars Season 7 showed us the other end of a call among the Jedi that we saw in Revenge of the Sith. And then on to Episode 3. This episode opens by turning to the right from the Andor title in the Starscape background to show Cassian floating aimlessly from a nebular cloud. He makes it worse by trying to hotwire the Avenger and looks as dumb floating in space as he did bumping around the Sinar hangar. On Mina Rao, B2EMO plays an adorable game of keep away with these kids.
Never catch us now.
We hear a droid saying, "Behind you, B," which is either the sprinkler droid or the other one, and it's captioned to be named AGR9, which I assume is abbreviated for agricultural. We also see one girl playing with a toy bowcaster. In the wide shot, we see one of these kids just runs directly into the sprinkler and doesn't react at all. Maybe another kid peed his pants and he's trying to make him feel better. On the left is a creature that looks like the Mina Rao variant of a bantha with sharper horns, and I love that they seem to have used a practical puppet for this. We see this guy throughout the episode and he's always just like, and I want to work for Lucasfilm and just be the guy who just does this. I think that'd be awesome. We begin this episode with this sweet Norman Rockwellian tableau of humble agrarian life as these farmers laugh over a family dinner. Kellen warns Brasso that they're next on the inspection schedule and gets him some transfer paperwork. And this girl next to Bix plays with a string puppet of an ATST. It's like, kid, there's better toys than like instruments of war trying to kill you. But maybe that's all they got. Maybe the mom's like, here, play with this Nazi toy so that the Nazis don't drag us away. Mon has one final chat with Leda before she gives her daughter away way to marriage, telling her about her own wedding day in the same room, how her mother was drunk on the day of that arranged wedding. Lita responds,
"What are you doing?"
Yeah, Lita has never had a mother heart-to-heart like this, let alone a mom getting cold feet after pushing so hard for this marriage for political and financial reasons. Mon doesn't understand her daughter enough to know that Perrin's poetic speech the night before would connect with Lita far more than Mon now offering this vulnerable exit ramp to some unknown path that Lita in her sheltered existence would never understand. So all she really says is this:
"I wish you were drunk."
Oof. Lita wishes she just had a normal, traditional Chandrillan mom like her grandmother was, even if it means an alky. And this informs Mon pounding him down for the rest of this episode. The Chandrillan wedding rituals are a fascinating mix of details from our world. Lita wears a white gown, and there are some Japanese-inspired motifs in the costume design of the wedding party. Lita steps over a ceremonial branch held by Stekan's parents, which might be a nod to jumping the broom. Also, trees and branches seem to factor into a number of spiritual traditions in the Star Wars universe. The Jedi, the Tuskens, the Witches of Brendok. Stekan offers Lita to join my circle, which we see as a disc of grass covered in white flower petals, which might connect to that day 2 hike to some specific sacred summit, because they seem to be all about connecting themselves to the terrain and the nature of Chandrilla. And here it involves the betrothed to be standing on natural Chandrillan grass for this sacred moment. You may have also noticed that Lita had one shorter braid and one longer one, so that Stekan can cut the longer one. Maybe the first one had already been cut when the proposal was made, and he uses shears carried by the father of the bride, Perrin. So this pretty clearly symbolizes the severing of the tie between the bride and the family she was born into, the way like the father of the bride gives his daughter away. But Perrin saying, "Do with it what you wish," from our outsider's point of view, almost feels like it's a Chandrillan custom to be totally okay with these arranged marriage couples also stabbing each other in the back if they wish. As we transition away, I love how we cut from Stekan cutting Lita's braid to Dedra setting the table with a knife, because she is basically about to do the same thing with Cyril and his mother Edie. Sever the proverbial umbilical cord to tell the parent, "Your kid is mine now." While all of the fits on this show have been fine as hell, I love seeing Dedra and Cyril play fashion show with the colors only within the Imperial neutral palette. Dedra alternates from white to black and chooses black because she's gonna go black hat in this dinner and put on a Diana Spencer black revenge dress. Cyril chooses dark gray because while he's leaning Dedra, he's still kind of caught in the middle between Dedra and his mom. I also love how Cyril adjusts the fondue fork on his mother's plate, paranoid that she's gonna find something to criticize. Indeed, when Edie arrives, she rudely doesn't take Dedra's handshake, but only because she's caught up criticizing her son for taking so long to introduce them. Cassian frantically calls Clea, saying he wasn't trained to fly this TIE Avenger.
"I've been upside down for 2 days.
I know he means I've been confused for 2 days, but I like the idea that at some point the gravity controls of the TIE Avenger might have gotten screwy and he was like stuck on the ceiling of it, like Nathan Fielder in The Curse. While this call with Clea starts with panic over the drop-off being screwed up, Cassian merely learning that Mina Rao has a signal blockade is enough to lock him into gear, so he's now able to pilot the TIE Avenger with confidence and cranking that lever we all instinctively know how to do whenever we're in the pilot seat of Smuggler's Run: jump to hyperspace. Now we don't see the classic from behind star stretch shot, but we do see the stars stretching in the background behind his hand on the crank, which puts the focus on the crank itself, and I love that. Edie says,
"Children have so much to teach us. It's a lesson that never ends."
Now she means this condescendingly, how she never understood her son Cyril, and that misunderstanding was his fault, not hers. We can imagine Mon Mothma feeling the same way about Lita, but taking the blame herself in that instance. Edie brings up Cyril's uncle Harlow again. We heard about him in season 1. He took Cyril under his wing, and he's kind of a bad guy. And when it's finally Dedra's turn to speak, she says her parents were arrested, and she was raised in an Imperial Kinderblock. And Kinderblock, I know it's like kindergarten, but we get the term kindergarten from a German root. And I love how they use the German root word of kinder, meaning children, kind of like how everything in Imperial culture is like vaguely German, or at least European, with recurring English accents of the high Imperial officers. During dessert, Edie smashes the not too sweet Coruscant cake, ruining its impressive presentation and making it just kind of a pliable mush, just like she does to her son. Cyril excuses himself after Edie again dismisses his work on Morlana 1, and Dedra finally unleashes.
This game ends now. You want Cyril in your life, you will think before you speak.
Get her! She also threatens Edie over mentioning Uncle Harlow this much, since Uncle Harlow has an ISB rap sheet, and when Cyril returns from moping on his bed, he finds that Dedra's aggression worked. Edie is more respectful of Cyril's 2 promotions at the Board of Standards. Not to be rooting for a fascist torture couple, but men, get yourself a woman who goes to bat for you against your toxic family like she does. At the wedding, they unveil the Chandy Merle statue that Luthen had brought in as a wedding gift from Davo.
It's a temple figure, one of 12, that was stolen 25,000 years ago when Chandrila was sacked by Rakatan invaders.
Whoa! So back in season 1, episode 4, Luthen also brought up relics from what he said was the Rakatan Empire.
It's a Quati signet, blue kyber, skystone, the ancient world. Celebrates the uprising against the Rakatan invaders.
The Rakata were an ancient species introduced in the Knights of the Old Republic game, believed to have invented hyperspace technology, who back in their day enslaved much of the galaxy and ruled in what was called the Infinite Empire. But since Knight of the Old Republic predated the Disney buyout of Lucasfilm, the Rakata were deemed to be legends and not officially part of the canonical ancient world of Star Wars. Indeed, on Ahsoka, Dave Filoni seemed to suggest that migration from Peridia was part of the origin of the civilization of Star Wars, and the Jedi Survivor games suggest that the Zepho were part of that origin story, but the Rakata seem to be one of the Knights of the Old Republic details that Lucasfilm story group as a whole are okay keeping as part of the mythological backstory of the canonical universe Star Wars. It's also possible, though I hope this isn't the case, that in-universe, the legend of the Rakata is seen as a sort of apocryphal mythology akin to Noah's Ark and the Garden of Eden, and Luthen hypes up these legends to make his relics seem more valuable to wealthy buyers. At the very least, I think Luthen totally overcharged Davo as much as he could to get some extra cash to fund further rebel efforts. Now, the exact look of this statue kind of reminds me of the Wills that we saw at the Wellspring of Life in Clone Wars. Like, if we're talking about the ancient world, couldn't it be possible that the Chandrilan Society might have had some kind of artistic display of the things that started everything? Luthen chats with Erskine.
My father's Chandrilan. I was born in Naboo. My mother's Gorman.
Oh.
He was married. There was a scandal.
Huh, interesting. So Erskine would have been born on Naboo, probably sometime during or after the Battle of Naboo that we saw in Phantom Menace. And since he was born out of wedlock from an affair, I'm gonna spread the rumor around that this Gorman mom actually was knocked up by Senator Sheev Palpatine from Naboo, and she blamed it on an affair that she was also having on the side. Erskine Samaj, a Demon Mothma from the animated Rebels series, will be watching your career with great interest. This also sounds like how Luthen is gonna get an introduction to the group of Gormans who are going to be part of the Gorman uprising later this season. Luthen watches a particularly sauced Tay Kolma getting increasingly bold around Mon Mothma, saying he's going to start standing up for himself and talking to Dava directly, and Tay leans in to start to say something to Mon, but he leaves. She never finds out what profession of love he's probably going to say, and I love how we stay in this shot, twisting around Luthen on the dance floor, having to smoothly adjust his demeanor and welcoming Lita and Stekon to the dance floor. Brasso breaks the news to B that he's staying behind with Talia to wait for Cassian to arrive on Mina Rao. B is still where they were all feasting earlier, so I assume that when Brasso said he's still playing with his friend, he actually was saying, B's still playing with that bantha thing that just munches on grain nonstop in the background. And it's super fun to think that B would just bump into that thing over and over again, saying, play. 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 Brasso and Bix are ready to leave, but they realize Will had darted away to say goodbye to his local honey, Bila. Big mistake, as it bogs Will down with a speeder at the trading post. Lieutenant Kroll also eyes Bila here, showing he's not just into Bix, he's a straight up predator looking to get off with any of the local women. Seriously, this guy. Luthen tells Mon that Tay's gotta go.
You know the number.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
How nice for you.
The bitterness Luthen feels for someone who doesn't share her dreams with ghosts. Why do I think this is all gonna end with Lita going on an ill-fated girls trip to Alderaan? Ugh.
I know peeking.
A DJ droid floats out on the floor with lights and speakers looking like a jukebox. Get me one of these. And the younger guests go wild. Stekon's mother gets Mon to take a shot and join the dance because you know at weddings, the moms and aunts have the most fun. But for Mon, the drinking is her really numbing her pain over what she knows Luthen is gonna do to her childhood flame and what she has done to her daughter. So she's just kind of turning back into her mother to get drunk at a wedding. Cassian radios to Bix saying Stone and Sky, which is a code phrase they got from the chant of Sky and Stone during Marva's funeral march on Ferrix. Willman runs back on foot. Brasso has to take the speeder bike out to find him and gets arrested while, Lieutenant Kroll creeps up on Bix. Like many undocumented workers, Bix finds herself vulnerable to an authority figure who exploits her for sexual favors, which is disgusting enough, even when it's just at first verbal, but this scene doesn't pull any punches, and it just keeps escalating the assault. Now, depicting a violent sexual assault is new to Star Wars, to be sure, but this is what Andor set out to do, to depict the violent realities and ugly truths of the oppression that fascist regimes inflict on marginalized groups. This is really the kind of thing that all occupying Mandalorian armies in human history have done and tried to do when their power is essentially unchecked. Like, if the Empire was okay with global genocide, don't you think a lot of them were doing shit exactly like this? Like, I don't want to break down the exact choreography of the fight, but I just say kudos to the actors and to the production for committing to the brutal honesty of these kind of attacks and not even shying away from Bix using the R word. And yes, I have to say the R word because YouTube flags that term, which is insane in the context of media criticism. I just feel so bad for Bix to go from the trauma of the Dysonite audio torture nightmares from Gorst to this. Brasso gets brought to Kellen, and Brasso goes into this routine where he rages at Kellen for selling him out and then gives Kellen a knowing look. And it's so sweet to see Brasso covering for Kellen, knowing that Kellen was a Mina Rao farmer fired up as a rebel sympathizer wanting access to know what Imperial occupation was doing to this planet, but now Brasso clears Kellen of any wrongdoing for now and saves his life. Meanwhile, back at the party, Mon Mothma lets loose. So Niamos was the name of the beach resort location that Cassian went to in episode 7 of last season where he got arrested. And this music is a banger track from composer Nicholas Bertel that was actually remixed a few times in season 1. Niamos Galaxy Mix, Niamos Morlana Club Mix, and Niamos Coruscant Lounge Mix. This song that we hear during the wedding is another remix, and since they got the name Niamos from Miami or Miami, all of them chanting Niamos is kind of like us at a wedding chanting Fireball. Mr. Worldwide. But I hate to dance right now because the juxtaposition of this mindless drunken dancing just hurts so much when we cut back to the ugly violence with Bix. And it ends with Lieutenant Kroll actually looking pretty shaken, keeping his distance as he realizes that Bix is way more hostile than he expected. And she gets the last strike as he staggers outside and drops dead. Tay goes to the valet, and Vel finally realizes where Cinta has been in costume as Tay's new driver, clearly on assignment from Luthen to kill this man. Cassian's TIE Avenger swoops down over the grain fields, and we hear the classic Star Wars targeting sound on Cassian training his missiles on the Imperial transport headed for Bix. Again, Cassian having the focus of his loved ones being in danger sharpens his senses and empowers him with confidence and expertise that he didn't have before. He's now closer to an ace pilot. I know, not technically an ace because he hasn't shot down enough ships, but like, he's on his way. Cassian sees Brasso fleeing on his speeder bike and brings the TIE Avenger around, but sadly, we see one overly calm stormtrooper raising his blaster. The one stormtrooper with good aim, apparently, and we know what it means. So Cassian opens fire and does the same move that he used on the pursuing TIEs on the Sinar planet, blow something above them to bury them. Cassian finds Brasso dead, and the three leave his body behind in the TIE Avenger as Cassian and Bix share a devastated look while the Niamos party music and Mon's frantic dancing plays over it. While you could say that Brasso died needlessly going out to find Wilman, it's actually not true, because since Lieutenant Kroll already suspected them, Brasso did save a life with this sacrifice, Kellen and Kellen's entire family, because had Brasso not performatively lunged at Kellen and told the imps that Kellen snitched, all of those good people at the feast likely would have been annihilated. Yeah, even the cattle. Damn, that show is so good. And I know it's not the exact flavor of Star Wars that everyone in the Star Wars fan base gets behind, but I also don't know what that flavor is anymore. If you need a refresher on Andor Season 1, we're actually putting together a Season 1 breakdown compilation video that's going to be on the channel sometime in the next week. And be sure to watch a very special episode of The Break Room in which we talk about the state of Star Wars after Celebration 2025 and some other stuff we want to share with you. Comment down below with your thoughts, and big thanks to Noah Chen and Brandon Barrick for their research help on this video. And special thanks to our YouTube member, Marisa Miranda, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.